What is up, everyone? Jeremy here, and I've got a brand new Reaper metal mix template for you, this time using only free plugins. Let's go ahead and just kick things off with an audio sample that demonstrates the template in action. So there it is, that's what it sounds like. Now let's go ahead and walk through the template and have a look at what's going on and have a look at some of the plugins that I'm using. Now I do want to call out real quick, I'm not going to go through every single little detail of this mix or this template and all the different plugin settings, because then this would be a 2+ hour video. So to try and keep things more condensed, I'm going to walk through some high level stuff, but obviously at the end of the video, I'm going to tell you where you can download this template and where you can get all of these free plugins as well. So after you download it, you got everything set up and you're playing around with it on your own. If you have any questions about why I'm doing anything in a certain way or why I did something the way that I did, just drop in the comments of this video down below and ask your questions there, and I'd be happy to respond. With that, let's go ahead and pull up the DAW again and have a look at the template. All right, so here we are back in Reaper. So let's just go ahead and start walking through this template or this mix, really. So the way that I tend to approach mixing is kind of a hybrid approach where it's not fully top down, but I do some top down processing. So we'll start there and then we'll get to the buses and then the individual tracks. So the first thing I'm gonna do is pull up the mix window, and I'm on a Mac, so that's Command M for me. So here we are, and you can see my main, the 2 bus as they call it, right? Like my master bus. I have some things going on here to increase the loudness, and we'll just kind of run through those real quick. This is the Louderizer. This is a JS plugin. It comes with Reaper. There's also another built-in JS Reaper plugin called the Event Horizon Limiter / Clipper, and this is what's just giving me the volume. So real quick, I'll just bypass both of these and play it back, and you'll hear how much louder it gets when I enable them. So there you go, there's an example of what those are doing. So this is actually not a free plugin, but this is just what I used to put together the plugin so that I knew that it kind of sat well with some of my typical reference tracks. So that's all this really is used for referencing. And some of the stuff that I heavily use for referencing is some of the new Scion and Monuments tracks. So I can actually just get rid of that now because it is done. I don't need to reference anymore. And then this is just a loudness meter just so that I could see what those LUFs were coming in at. All right, moving down from the 2 bus, we have my main bus. And this is where I tend to try and do kind of the gluing of everything, because everything in the entire mix below this runs through this main bus before it goes out to the 2 bus. So you'll see there's just some low end gluing here, like low end taming, if you will, trying to pull back any loud spikes in the low end to kind of pull in the low end using this TDR Nova, which is a dynamic EQ or compressor. All right, and then the next up is the LA compressor from Analog Obsession. This is obviously based on an LA2A. Now, this is only just for some very minor gluing, and it's maybe like a half a dB is all it's really doing. We'll take a look. Yeah, it's like a half a dB is all it's really hitting. So just some minor gluing. And then this is another compressor from Tokyo Dawn Labs, I think is what it is, TDR. And this one is it has a little bit faster of an attack and release time, and that is to duck the snare drum hits, which I've purposely mixed a bit louder than everything else in the mix, so that when the snare hits, it kind of it adds a little bit of punch to the snare, but it also kind of ducks everything, and I just like the way that sounds. Which is actually a trick I believe I picked up from Nolly in one of his mixing videos in the past, but we'll have a quick look at what this is doing, and I think it's maybe peaking around -2 dB of gain reduction. Yeah, it didn't even quite hit 2 dB, but I think some of the louder peaks throughout the track maybe hit around -2 dB. So that is what's going on there. And then the last thing here is just cutting off a touch of the super high-end frequencies, just so that things don't get overly harsh. And that's the main bus. Going back from there, we have, I'll just pull it up this way so we can look at everything. All right, so there's 3 plugins here on the pre-main bus. So the way that I route things is I have the drums and the bass going in through pre-main, and then pre-main goes into main, and then I have the guitar bus, which just goes directly into main, and it bypasses this pre-main. And that's because I use this pre-main to add top-end air and sheen on things that I feel like it goes well on. So like I said, it's kind of a hybrid top-down approach. And so that's really all that's happening here. There might be a tiny bit of compression happening in this opto compressor in this STEQ Analog Obsession plugin, but then there's also just some minor EQ shaping, and you can see we're kind of taming some of the low end, boosting up some of the air, and then using the free Slate Digital Fresh Air just to kind of boost up some of those the mid air and the high air. And that's essentially all that's happening there. All right, and so next up is the stereo width bus. And if you are familiar with my channel, then you have seen, or should have seen, the stereo width trick video that I released, I don't know, 4 or 5 videos back, something like that. If you haven't seen it, I'll put a link up here. Go check that out. I promise you it will blow your mind. But all this really is a high pass, and it is a short decay reverb. So you can see the high pass there and the built-in reverb, and that's basically it. And then you can route things into this and blend them in, and it adds this really expansive widening effect because of the widening of the reverb. All right, and so next up is the drums. And like I said before, I'm not gonna go through everything in super fine detail because this would take too long, but I will mention some of the high-level things. What we're using for this is the free Slate Digital SSD 5.5, I believe it is, or SSD 5, as it says here, SSD Sampler 5 from Steven Slate. These are absolutely free, and they sound really good for free drums. So again, the links to download these, look for all that in the description below. But again, we're using the Steven Slate drums here, and I'm just gonna kind of click around so you can hear what these sound like on their own. And this is with all of the processing in this template. This is not what these sound like just out of the box. So there you go. There's some quick examples of what the drums sound like. And so let's just kind of quickly walk through what's all happening here. I'll start at my drum bus. So first thing is we're just using some multi-band comp to tame some of the low-end frequencies from like any super hard low-end from the kick drum or potentially from some of the floor toms. We're using another Analog Obsession here. This is the Brit channel, which is based on a Neve, I believe, series EQ. And you can see all I'm doing is just boosting some of the top end, trying to get some more air. Then we're doing some Pultec EQ again with Analog Obsession. This is the Rare EQ, and I'm boosting and attenuating at 30 Hertz just to kind of do that old Pultec style EQ trick, where when you boost and attenuate the same frequency, it kind of changes the shape of the waveform and the sound, and it hits in a different way. And I kind of like just a little bit of it here. And then I'm boosting at like 16 kilohertz just to add some more air here. So that's what's happening on this one. And then the Buster SE, which is clearly based on an SSL G series bus compressor, again from Analog Obsession here. And this is just doing some overall gluing across all the drums. Looking at the kick. So you heard some of the audio right there. You heard the audio sample in the beginning and you just heard me click on the kick. So there is actually some additional stuff happening here, and I'm blending an additional sample with the SSD5 free kit that you just heard. So quickly running through all of the tracks for the kick, we have the Slate kick, then we have the Cola kick. And so what is the Cola kick? Well, if I click on Cola kick, you'll see right here, this is so I actually made this VST as it says on the interface of it here, but the samples inside of it that are playing, they're from Christian Cola, and to get these original raw samples, he provided these for free in his Discord channel or server. And so in the original format, it was just this long audio wave file, and I went through and did the process of cutting out all of the individual samples and putting them into velocity layers, and I created the VST to be able to trigger those individual samples, and from a MIDI track, and it has 6 velocity layers, so it's very dynamic and it's very real sounding. And it actually has 2 outputs. It has a kick close and a kick room, so you have like the direct mic mix of 3 different mics. And this is with a blend that I liked for my taste. And then the kick room was just a single room track in there. So I've got that one going out as well. So out of that, we have the kick close and the kick room that I'm EQing here a little bit and blending to my liking. And so I'll actually go ahead and just solo the Cola kick samples here so you can hear what they sound like. So there you go. And you can hear how it's not like using the exact same sound every time. Like it sounds like multiple samples. And that's because of the different velocity layers. And in fact, if I back it up here, I think there's actually some additional layers being used. So there you go. You can hear how some of those hits were softer than others. And that's because of the different velocity layers, and it's using a round robin algorithm so that not every hit is the same to avoid the super robotic sound. So those are being blended with the Slate kick to provide that super metal, heavy sounding kick drum. All right, moving on to the snare drum now. And it's a very similar thing to what I just went over with the kick, but what we'll do real quick is just kind of start with the bus so you can see the processing happening in the bus here. And we're just doing some high passing, SSQ, which is based on an SSL style EQ, and again from Analog Obsession, this is the SSQ, and you can see we're just boosting some top end, boosting some low end, just to try and make this snare drum sound beefier and have some nice top end crispy snap to it. And then the SSL G style bus compressor again from Analog Obsession, and then the bit presser. So this is actually again from Analog Obsession, but all I'm using here is the limiter on this just to try and tame any super harsh peaks that might be happening and just limit those so they don't try to really cut through the mix. And for the individual snare tracks, it's very much the same story as the kick drum. I'm blending a Christian Cola snare sample with the SSD5 snare. So the sample that I'm blending from Christian Cola here is a snare sample that he provided for free in one of his YouTube videos. Again, I believe you have to join his Discord server to get it, but again, all the links will be in the description below. And I'm triggering this, it's a one-shot sample, but I'm triggering this using the Resample-O-Matic 5000, which comes with Reaper. So you can see the settings I've got there. And then I'm just doing some follow-up processing to that. You'll see it all in the template when you download it. I won't go through everything in detail, but here's a quick sample of what this snare sounds like. So this is a one shot, right? So you can hear how kind of robotic it can sound when you just solo it. But when you've got it blended back a bit, but where it's, you know, the character of it is still coming through, providing that low beef and that nice snap on the top, which this snare really has and sounds fantastic. But when you blend it all together, you get this. So because of the SSD5 having velocity layers, and it doesn't sound super robotic, and then you put it in the whole mix and it sounds like this. Right there you go. So that is the one shot and kind of how I'm putting together the snare drums. So the toms, I'm gonna kind of skip over the toms. There's really not a lot to talk about here. These are basically just the straight toms out of SSD5. I'm not blending with any samples, just some very minor EQ and compression. That's it. Jumping to the, let's see what I'm gonna do. We'll do the rooms here. So the rooms have a bit of processing on them. This is Bittersweet, which is a kind of like a transient shaper. You pull it to the left to get less transient, which essentially brings up more sustain, and then to the right to get more transient and therefore basically less sustain. So I'm pulling out some of the transient of this because I don't really need transients in my rooms. I want the sustain from my rooms. So that's what I'm doing there. Then the re-EQ or re-Q, however you say it, built-in EQ from Reaper. Just basically doing some shaping on the ends, filtering if you will, boosting some low ends around low end around 200 hertz for that the fundamental frequency of the snare. I really wanted some more beefy snare ring in my rooms, and then a couple harsh frequencies that were super resonant and ringing really hard. I pulled those out. Then the SSL EQ again, and you can just kind of see we're adding some low end beef here. And then pulling out some of those boxy frequencies of 500 hertz as well as 1.6 kilohertz, and then boosting up just very, very slightly at like 16K. And then after that, the SSL style bus compressor again, just to add a really good amount of gain reduction. And as you can see, the fast attack to kind of cut off some of those transients, and then just give me lots of sustain, obviously, with the fast release. So see if we can just solo this real quick so you can hear the rooms. So there you go. You can hear a lot of snare in there, and you can hear how it's ringing out. And now if I bypass the bus compressor, listen to the difference. So you can see how that's really helping bring out some of that, some of the sustain on the snare and everything. So that just kind of adds that big sound and space to these drums. And then the last things I'll kind of jump through here real quick is we have 3 buses that I'm sending the drums, some of the drums into. We have drum smash, drums punch, drums verb. Drum smash, I'll just solo it so you can hear what it sounds like. So you can hear it, it just smashes the drums. And basically what we're doing here is we're just, not that, I wanted this one. We're heavily compressing the drums here and heavily limiting, and then adding a bit of distortion on here using this Analog Obsession distortion plugin, Distox. And that gives you that just kind of smashed sound. And you can hear how quiet that was. I don't want a ton of this blended in, but I wanted a little bit of it just to kind of add that raw, you know, kind of dirty sound to these drums with the way they're distorted and smashed. Next up is the punch, and I'll solo it real quick. So there you go. Exactly what you would expect, right? So like just kind of boosting some of those fundamental frequencies around where the punchy frequencies are of the kick and the snare, and then adding a good nice and snap to the top end, and it's all transient. There's like hardly any sustain, right? So adding these in there just kind of add that smack when they're like the kick and the snare hit, and that's what's being sent to these, as well as the toms. All right, and next up is the drum Verb Bus, and I will go ahead and solo this one. There you go. That is a really great sounding reverb, especially for a free plugin. So where that is coming from is the Acon Digital Verberate Basic 2. Absolutely free plugin. And you actually get a plate, a room, a hall, and a lush hall style plugins, and just one dial to dial up how much you want of it or how little you want of it. I just went 100% all in on this because it's a bus and I can blend in how much that I want. And it just sounds so good. I also have Valhalla Supermassive in here bypassed. This one was sounding really good as well. It's just a little bit shorter of a reverb, so I'll let you experiment which one you prefer when you download this, but it is there and it is also totally free. All right, the last two things we're gonna look at real quick here are the bass guitar and then the guitars. And so for bass, basically, I'm gonna skip over going through the plugins because you can download the template, you can look at and see what I'm doing. There's one that I will call out, and it's this black from Nembrini, which is obviously based on a rat style distortion pedal, and this is what's giving us the distortion and drive. And I'll just go ahead and solo the bass so you can hear it. And then see what's back here. So there you go. You got that really distorted, raw sounding metal bass, right? So that's what you're getting. And so what I wanted to call out in this real quick is you're going to see some wave files with this, and these are rendered files from Submission Audio's Gin bass. Now I do have an actual bass I could have tracked with, but I was lazy and I didn't. So I just put Gin bass on here, which is a virtual instrument, and just wrote out the MIDI notes that way and then rendered the bass files. Now, why am I pointing that out? Well, that's because maybe you have a virtual instrument that maybe you've already paid for that you want to use with this template. Well, it's already set up and ready for you to do that. As you can see, I have Contact here, which already has Gin bass in it. You could pull up Contact if it's a Contact instrument and just add your instance of Gin bass or whatever bass it is you're using. And these two tracks right here and here are receiving output from Contact. So it's kind of already wired and ready to go. You just need to unmute them and rewire things up for whatever bass instrument you're using. On the other hand, if you have an actual bass you just want to track your bass tracks with, you've got two tracks right here. And you have probably seen this in the past if you're familiar with my channel, but if not, the way that this works is one is a DI for the low end, and then another is a higher end, like the mids and highs, that has the distorted part. Again, I'm not going to go through it. You can download the template and take a look there. But that's what I wanted to call out for the bass. All right, and the last thing we'll look at is the guitars. And all I'm going to really do is just pull up these plugins here so we can look at what I'm using to generate these tones. So the first thing is just some shaping of the DI signal. And I have two overdrive pedals here. Again, both completely free. These are both from Nembrini Audio and both are fantastic. You can choose whichever one you think works best for you, but they're both in here ready to go. And you can see we have an 808 style and then this Klon Minotaur. I really liked the way that this Minotaur sounded. It sounded so good, and I could dial up the gain almost as far as I wanted to, and it never really got too dirty. So this thing just sounded really, really good. And then you can just easily flip these out with the 808 just like that if you want to. And then the tone itself is coming from the Ignite Amps Emissary from STL Tones. This thing is fantastic. It's been passed in previous videos of mine, and it will certainly be in future videos. It is a fantastic amp, especially for free. And then the IR loader that I'm using is also from Ignite Amps and STL Tones. It is the NAD IR, and this is the IRs that I'm using here are completely free. They are from Eris Effects, and I'm blending the EDV H2 with the V30 number 2 from the modern folder in this pack, and that gives us our guitar tones. That's basically it. There is some minor EQ and multi-band compression on the low end and stuff like that in the bus you can take a look at when you download this template, but that is the template. That is a quick overview of how I put all this together. All right, so now let's talk about where you're going to download this template and where you can find all of these plugins that I use in the template. So for that, I'm asking you to come join me in my Discord server. The invite link is in the description below. In there is a channel called Mix Templates, and I have shared all the information, including download links for everything, including the template itself, in that channel. So all you have to do is come join me and some other great folks in our Discord server. Again, that link to the invite is in the description below. Just click that, you'll go straight into Discord. If you download this template and put it to use, I would love to hear it. Just hit the comment section down below and share links to whatever you create using this template. Additionally, you can apply the hashtag Jeremy Fox Mix template to any social media posts, and I'll check those out as well. If you found this helpful in any way, do me a favor and hit that like button down below, and consider subscribing to my channel for more like this in the future. With that, I want to thank you for watching and thank you for your support.